I stood frozen in the pouring rain outside Synergy Tech, clutching soggy bank records while my husband, Jason, kissed his boss across the street. He believes I am just a naive housewife he has manipulated into silence. But he forgot one small detail. My reclusive uncle is actually a former FBI interrogation expert. When I knocked on his door tonight, I was not just seeking comfort. I was initiating a campaign of absolute destruction. My name is Sarah, and 3 years ago, I disappeared. I did not vanish in the literal sense, of course. My body remained present, occupying space in the damp, freezing air of a Chicago suburb, huddled on a cracked plastic bench at a bus stop that smelled of stale urine and exhaust fumes. But the woman I used to be was gone, eroded by 1,000 tiny cuts until only this shell remained. I pulled my knees to my chest, trying to preserve whatever body heat I had left. The rain was relentless, soaking through the thin fabric of a beige coat that was 2 sizes too big and far too light for the biting November wind. My shoes were worse. They were cheap black flats with the soles worn down to the pavement, allowing the icy water to seep into my socks. I stared at my reflection in the gutter, seeing hollow cheeks and eyes that looked like 2 burnt holes in a sheet of paper. I did not notice the man approaching until his shadow fell over me. My body reacted before my brain did. I flinched violently, jerking my arm up to cover my face, my breath hitching in a sharp, terrified gasp. It was a reflex honed by months of walking on eggshells, of anticipating a blow for breathing too loudly. Sarah. The voice was rough but gentle. I lowered my arm slowly. Standing there, holding a dripping umbrella, was my Uncle Frank. He was my mother's distant cousin, the useless relative who spent his days fishing and fixing old radios, or so Jason had always sneered. I had not spoken to him in 2 years because Jason said Frank was a bad influence. Frank did not smile. He did not rush to hug me. His eyes, usually crinkled with easy humor, narrowed as they swept over my trembling form. He saw the flinch. He saw the way I pressed my back against the graffiti-covered glass of the shelter. Uncle Frank, I whispered, my voice cracking from disuse. I didn't know you were. I was just grabbing a coffee, he said, his tone carefully neutral. He reached into a paper bag and pulled out a steaming cup. He extended it toward me slowly, like one might offer food to a cornered, feral animal. Here. You look like you need this more than I do. I reached for the cup, but my hand was shaking so badly that hot liquid sloshed over the rim, scalding my fingers. I did not even wince. The physical pain was nothing compared to the cold inside my chest. I can't stop shaking, I stammered, shame flushing my pale face. I'm sorry. I'm just so cold. Frank didn't comment on the spill. He just watched my hands. My place is 2 blocks away. Come on. Panic flared in my chest, hot and sudden. I looked at the digital watch on my wrist. It was 4 in the afternoon. Jason would be home at 6. If dinner wasn't on the table at 6 sharp, the silence would start. The silence was always worse than the shouting. No, I have to go, I said, standing up too quickly and nearly stumbling. Jason he'll be home soon. If I'm not there to make the roast, he gets so disappointed. I really can't. Frank stepped into my path. Not aggressively, but with the solidity of a wall. He looked at the bruises I had tried to hide with concealer under my eyes. You are freezing. Sarah, you are not going anywhere until you are dry, Frank said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying an authority I had never heard from him before. The bus isn't coming for another 40 minutes. 10 minutes. Just give me 10 minutes. I was too weak to argue. I followed him like a ghost, keeping my head down, terrified that Jason might somehow see us through the sheet of rain. Frank's apartment was small, cluttered with books and old electronics, but it was warm. He sat me down at a small wooden table in the kitchen and placed a bowl of canned soup in front of me. The smell of chicken and broth hit me, and my stomach cramped with hunger. I realized I had not eaten a real meal in 2 days because Jason had cut my grocery allowance again for mismanaging the household budget. The yellow light of the kitchen lamp buzzed softly. It was so normal, so safe. And that safety was what broke me. I picked up the spoon, but I couldn't lift it to my mouth. The dam inside me, the one I had built brick by brick to hold back the humiliation and the terror, simply collapsed. Tears spilled from my eyes, hot and fast. I didn't make a sound. I didn't sob or wail. I just sat there, staring at the soup, while water poured down my face, dripping off my chin onto the table. I don't know what to do. I choked out, the words barely audible. I tried so hard to be good, but nothing is ever enough. Frank didn't offer a tissue. He didn't pat my back or tell me it would be okay. He sat across from me, his hands clasped on the table, watching me with an intensity that was almost unnerving. It wasn't the look of a worried uncle. It was the look of a man analyzing a crime scene. He waited, patient and silent, giving me the space to breathe for the first time in years. I looked up at him, wiping my face with my sleeve, and decided that I had nothing left to lose. He's destroying me. Uncle Frank, I whispered, my voice trembling with the weight of the truth. And I think he's going to kill me. It started small, I told Frank, clutching the mug of tea as if it were an anchor keeping me from drifting away. Jason told me Omega Solutions was bleeding money. He said it was just a rough patch, that startups are always volatile in the first 3 years. I stared into the dark liquid, remembering the nights I spent calculating pennies while Jason wore Italian suits. I sold Mom's jewelry. I emptied my savings account. I even took out 3 personal loans in my name because Jason said his credit was overextended for the business. Frank remained silent, his face unreadable. But whenever I asked about the expenses, the charges at hotels or jewelry stores that I never saw, he would twist it, I continued, the bitterness rising in my throat like bile. He would look at me with this pitying expression and say, "Sarah, we discussed this yesterday. Don't you remember you authorized that payment for the client dinner?" I slammed the mug down on the table hard enough to make the spoon rattle. He made me believe I was losing my mind. Frank, he called it my episodes. He would say, "Honey, you're getting paranoid again. Maybe you need to up your medication." I don't even need medication. He just convinced me I did. I took a deep breath, the memory of yesterday playing out in my mind like a horror movie. "I saw them," I whispered. I was walking past Le Jardin, that French place downtown where a salad costs $40. I saw Jason through the window. He wasn't at a client meeting. He was holding hands with Victoria Vance. Frank raised an eyebrow. The CFO of Sterling Corp., the rival company. "The very same," I nodded, tears stinging my eyes again. "She is famous for firing 200 people right before Christmas just to boost the quarterly bonus." I stood in the rain and watched them. I slipped inside the vestibule and hid behind a decorative palm plant. I had to know. I shivered, recalling the sound of their laughter. It was the sound of my life being dismantled. "They were celebrating," I said, my voice trembling with rage. I heard Victoria ask him, "When does the little mouse sign the papers? And Jason—" He laughed. He said, "This Friday." She thinks it's a second mortgage to save the company. She has no idea she is signing away her grandmother's house. That house was the only thing I owned outright, the one thing my grandmother had left me to ensure I would always have a roof over my head. He told her, "Once I have the cash from the loan, we book the flight to Europe. By the time she realizes the house is in foreclosure, we will be sipping wine in Paris." Then he said, God, she is so pathetic. I have to hold my breath when I kiss her. It's like kicking a puppy that keeps coming back for more. I looked at Frank, desperate for him to understand the depth of my humiliation. I confronted him last night, I confessed. I screamed at him. I told him I knew about Victoria. I told him I wouldn't sign the papers for the house. What did he do? Frank asked, his voice low. He didn't even deny it. He smiled. He pulled out his phone and showed me a text thread with a Dr. Evans. He said, "Sarah, look at you. You are hysterical. Dr. Evans has agreed to sign the commitment papers, chronic paranoid schizophrenia with violent tendencies." I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the phantom chill of Jason's threat. He told me that if I didn't sign the house over to him willingly, he would have me institutionalized. He said, "Who will the judge believe? Sarah, the successful tech entrepreneur, or the unstable housewife with a history of memory loss?" He has the money, the lawyers, and the corrupt doctor. I have nothing. I am going to lose my home, and then he is going to lock me away. I looked at my uncle, expecting to see the same pity I saw in everyone else's eyes, but I didn't. Frank was no longer looking at me. He was staring at the wall, but his focus was elsewhere. His hands were resting on the table, and I watched as his fingers curled slowly into fists, the knuckles turning white. The gentle, fishing-loving uncle I remembered was gone. In his place was something colder, something dangerous. His eyes had shifted from warm brown to the color of hard steel. "He thinks you are alone," Frank said softly, but the tone sent a shiver down my spine. "He thinks you are prey." Frank stood up from the table, the wooden chair scraping harshly against the linoleum floor. He didn't say a word as he walked over to the dusty bookshelf that covered the entire east wall of his living room. I watched, confused, as he reached for a row of dog-eared Western novels and cheap romance paperbacks. With a swift motion of his arm, he swept them aside, not caring as they tumbled to the floor. Behind the books was not more wood, but a steel panel embedded into the wall. He punched a code into a digital keypad I hadn't even noticed before. The mechanism hissed, a sound of pressurized air escaping, and the heavy door swung open. He turned back to look at me, his silhouette framed by the shadows of the room. "Sarah, do you honestly think I am just a retired postal worker?" I blinked, the tears drying on my cheeks as the absurdity of the question hit me. I don't know. Jason always said you were just Jason is a fool," Frank interrupted, his voice devoid of the gentle warmth from earlier. "I spent 25 years with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes and Intelligence Division. My job wasn't sorting letters. It was hunting down people who think they are smarter than the system. People exactly like your husband and Victoria Vance." My jaw dropped. I stared at the man I thought I knew. The fishing trips, the quiet life, the lonely apartment, it was all a cover. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Because the last case I worked on involved people who kill to keep their secrets," Frank said, reaching into the safe. "I retired early and disappeared to keep the family safe. To keep you safe. But it seems the wolves found you anyway." He returned to the table and slammed down a black, military-grade hard case. He flipped the latches and opened it, revealing a sleek, matte black laptop, a handheld frequency scanner, and a collection of devices that looked like tiny black buttons. "This isn't a marriage crisis." "Sarah," Frank said, his eyes scanning the equipment as he powered it on. "This is a coordinated financial extraction. A long con. Jason didn't just cheat on you. He targeted you. He isolated you. And now he is trying to liquidate you." He picked up a burner phone from the case and dialed a number from memory. He put it on speaker, but kept the volume low. "This is Echo 4, Frank said into the phone. His voice was different now, commanding, precise, terrifying. "I am activating a ghost protocol. I need a full financial autopsy on 2 subjects. Jason Miller, Victoria Vance, and run a trace on a shell company called Omega Solutions. Priority 1. He paused, listening to the voice on the other end, then added, No warrants yet. We are going off the books for this one. I want everything. Offshore accounts, encrypted chats, purchase histories. I want to know what they ate for breakfast. He hung up and looked at me. I was trembling, but not from cold anymore. I was trembling from the sheer magnitude of what was happening. What? What are we going to do? I asked. Are we going to the police? No, Frank said, a cold smile touching his lips. The police need evidence. We need leverage. If we go to the police now, Jason claims you are insane, and with his connections, he might make it stick before anyone looks at the bank records. No, we don't fight them on their terms. He picked up one of the tiny black listening devices and held it up to the light. We don't scream. We don't make scenes. We are going to let them think they have won, Frank said, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me sit up straighter. We are going to feed their greed. We will give them exactly what they want, right until the moment they realize they are standing in their own graves. He slid the devices toward me. You are going to go back to that house, Frank commanded. You are going to wipe your face. You are going to apologize to Jason for running off. You will cook him dinner, and you will play the part of the scared, submissive wife perfectly. Can you do that? I looked at the high-tech equipment on the table, then at the steel in my uncle's eyes. The image of Jason laughing with Victoria in the restaurant flashed through my mind. But this time, the pain was replaced by something else. Adrenaline. I can do it, I said. Good. Frank nodded. Because tonight, we go to war. I walked out of Frank's apartment building 10 minutes later. The rain was still falling, but I didn't feel it. I wasn't the broken woman who had sat shivering at the bus stop. I was an operative. I was a soldier. And Jason had no idea that the useless uncle he had mocked for years was about to bring his entire world crashing down. I unlocked the front door, my heart hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the performance I was about to give. Jason was pacing the living room, a glass of scotch in his hand. He spun around as I entered, his face twisted in a snarl. "Where the hell have you been?" he shouted, slamming the glass down on the coffee table. "I have been calling you for 3 hours. Sarah, do you know how embarrassing it is to have a wife who wanders off like a demented child?" I shrank back, letting my shoulders slump. I forced tears into my eyes, channeling the very real exhaustion I felt. I'm so sorry. Jason, I stammered, staring at the floor. I took the wrong bus and ended up in a neighborhood I didn't know. My phone died and I was just so scared. He scoffed, walking over to inspect me with a look of utter disdain. You are pathetic. Go upstairs. I don't even want to look at you right now. I scurried up the stairs, hiding the cold determination in my eyes. Later that night, the house was silent. Jason was snoring heavily, the scotch doing its work. I slipped out of bed and crept to his side of the room. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to steady as I picked up his phone. I connected the small cable Frank had given me to my own phone, initiating the transfer of the Ghost software. A small progress bar appeared on the screen. It felt like it took a lifetime, but in reality, it was only 30 seconds. I did the same to his laptop in the study downstairs, moving through the dark house like a thief in my own life. The next morning, Jason left for work at 7 o'clock sharp. 20 minutes later, a white van pulled into the driveway. Frank stepped out wearing blue coveralls with city plumbing stitched on the pocket. He carried a heavy toolbox. "Morning, ma'am," he said loudly for the benefit of the neighbors, tipping his cap. "Here to check those pipes." Once inside, the act dropped. Frank moved with terrifying efficiency. He didn't look like a plumber anymore. He moved like a predator. In under an hour, He had planted listening devices behind the bookshelf in the study, inside the smoke detector in our bedroom, and even under the kitchen island. "These are active," he said, tapping an earpiece. "Audio and video, crystal clear." That afternoon, I went to Frank's apartment. The transformation of his basement was jarring. The fishing gear was gone, replaced by a bank of monitors and servers that hummed with a low electric menace. Two young men were typing furiously at keyboards. They looked identical, with pale skin and sharp features, wearing matching hoodies. "Sarah, meet the twins," Frank said, gesturing to them. "Best data miners on the eastern seaboard. I pulled them out of a federal indictment a few years back. They owe me." One of the twins spun his chair around. "We're in. Password security was a joke. Your husband uses his birthday." "Show her," Frank commanded. The screens flickered, displaying bank statements I had never seen. My breath caught in my throat. "He has been siphoning your accounts for 18 months, the twin explained, pointing to a column of red numbers. "Small transfers at first, then big ones. $300,000 total. It's all going to a shell company in the Cayman Islands registered to a V Holdings. Victoria Vance," I whispered. "It gets worse," Frank said, stepping forward. "Victoria isn't just sleeping with him. She is using him." We cross-referenced the shell company with her corporate filings. "She is embezzling millions from Sterling Corp and using Jason's startup as a wash cycle. He is her laundry man." Suddenly, the audio feed from my house crackled to life on the main speaker. It was a recording from an hour ago. Jason was on the phone. "Don't worry, babe." Jason's voice filled the room, smug and confident. "The crazy bitch is ready to crack. I'll have the signature by Friday. Once she signs the house over, I kick her out on the street and we are free. She won't even know what hit her." I felt a wave of nausea, but Frank's hand on my shoulder grounded me. "Do not break," Frank said, his voice hard as steel. "Use that anger. Convert it." "What do we do?" I asked, staring at the waveform of my husband's voice. Frank smiled, a cold, calculated expression that promised violence without lifting a finger. "We don't stop them," he said. "We accelerate them. We are going to initiate Operation Phoenix." "What is that?" "We make them think they have won the lottery," Frank explained, his eyes gleaming. "We are going to dangle a prize so big, so shiny, that their greed will blind them to the trap snapping shut around their necks." "Greed is a powerful anesthetic," Frank told me, sliding a dossier across the desk in his basement command center. "It numbs the instinct for self-preservation. We are going to offer Jason a number so big that he will stop thinking like a predator and start thinking like a glutton." The plan was elegant in its cruelty. Frank had resurrected an old alias, a Swiss angel investor named Mr. Roth. The role would be played by a former CIA asset who owed Frank a favor, but Jason would never meet him in person. He would only see the money. That Tuesday evening, I dropped the bait. Jason was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through his phone with a bored expression. I walked in holding a fabricated letter on thick, cream-colored stationery. "Jason," I asked, keeping my voice small and uncertain. I got this letter from a law firm in Delaware. It says something about Grandma's old portfolio. I think they made a mistake." He didn't even look up. "Throw it out." "Sarah, it's probably a scam. It says the account balance is $4,200,000. Jason froze. The phone lowered slowly. He looked at me, and for the first time in months, I saw genuine interest in his eyes. He snatched the letter from my hand. Grandmother invested in heavy metals in the 60s. I recited the script Frank had drilled into me. The firm said the dividends have been reinvesting automatically for 50 years. Jason rushed to his laptop. He typed in the URL listed in the letter, a website built by the twins just that morning. It was a masterpiece of deception, complete with secure login portals and live market tickers. When Jason punched in the temporary access code, his eyes widened. "My God!" he breathed. It's real. Sarah, do you have any idea what this is? It's too much, I said, wringing my hands. I don't understand tax laws or asset management. I'm scared I'll mess it up. Jason stood up and walked over to me. The transformation was instant and sickening. The sneer vanished, replaced by a warm, concerned smile. He placed his hands on my shoulders, his touch gentle. Hey, look at me, he cooed. You don't have to be scared. That's why I'm here. I'm the businessman. Remember, I can take care of this burden for you. We can merge this with the house assets, put everything under one umbrella. I'll handle the stress. I looked down, hiding the revulsion in my eyes. That would be such a relief. Jason. In the basement the next day. Frank played me the intercepts. Victoria was ecstatic. 4 million, her voice crackled over the speaker. Jason, that's our exit strategy. Forget the startup. Get her to sign the power of attorney for the stocks in the house. Once the funds transfer to your control, we dump her and fly to the Maldives. She's eating out of my hand. Jason's voice replied. She actually thanked me for taking the money. Can you believe how stupid she is, emboldened by the imaginary fortune? They started spending real money. The twins tracked their credit card activity. In 48 hours, Jason and Victoria charged $70,000. They put a deposit on a vacation villa in Tuscany. Victoria bought a diamond tennis bracelet. They were spending against a fortune that didn't exist, digging a hole so deep they would never climb out. That Friday, Jason took me to dinner at the most expensive steakhouse in the city. He ordered a bottle of wine that cost $600. Across the table, he reached for my hand, caressing my knuckles with his thumb. I've been thinking about us, Sarah, he said, his voice dripping with synthetic honey. I know I've been distant. Work has been crazy, but this windfall is a sign. We can finally relax. I want to take care of you. As he spoke, his other hand was under the table. My phone buzzed in my purse. It was a text from Frank, forwarding what Jason had just sent to Victoria. Sitting with the cow now. She's tearing up over the wine. God, I need a drink. Almost done. Papers are ready for tomorrow. I looked at Jason, forcing a tear to roll down my cheek. You're so good to me, Jason, I whispered. I don't deserve you. Nonsense, he smiled, squeezing my hand tight. Now, about the paperwork. I had the lawyers draw up a full transfer of authority. It just simplifies things so I can move the money into better yield accounts. We need to sign it tomorrow. Saturday morning. Can you do that for us? I took a sip of water to swallow the lump in my throat. This was it. The point of no return. Of course, I said. I'll sign whatever you want. Jason leaned back, satisfied. He thought he had won. He didn't know that the signature he was chasing was the pin on a grenade, and he was holding it right against his chest. The plan was running perfectly until Wednesday, when Victoria's paranoia almost derailed everything. I was in the kitchen making coffee when my burner phone buzzed against my hip. It was Frank. Do not look out the window. Frank's voice was clipped and urgent. There is a gray sedan parked 3 houses down. Victoria hired a private investigator. He is currently digging through your recycling bin. My heart stopped. I gripped the countertop, my knuckles turning white. Did he find anything? Did I leave something? Something incriminating. Relax, Frank said. We anticipated this. The twins are already handling it. Just stay inside and act normal. I didn't see what happened next, but Frank recounted it to me later with grim satisfaction. He didn't confront the investigator. Instead, he staged a piece of theater. One of his operatives, dressed in a convincing courier uniform, walked up the driveway while the investigator was watching. The courier accidentally dropped a thick envelope stamped with the logo of the fake Delaware law firm, spilling documents that looked like official certified stock verifications right where the spy could see them. While the investigator was busy photographing the planted documents, the twins were busy with his phone. From the basement command center, they intercepted the report he tried to send to Victoria. We caught the transmission, one of the twins told me later, grinning. He wrote that the assets looked legitimate. We just enhanced his certainty. We rewrote the message to say that the account is ironclad and verified by 3 independent sources. Victoria thinks she just got the green light from God himself. But the close call had spooked Jason. His patience, already thin, snapped completely on Thursday night. He came home smelling of stress sweat and stale whiskey. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when he kicked the door open. "I am done waiting. Sarah," he growled, marching toward me. "The lawyers say we can expedite the process if we do an emergency signing. I need that signature tomorrow." "Tomorrow," I stammered, backing away until my legs hit the bed. But I thought we were waiting until Monday." "I haven't read the papers yet." Jason grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging into my flesh hard enough to bruise. He leaned in close, his breath hot on my face. "You don't need to read them," he hissed. "You just need to sign. If you don't, I'm making the call to Dr. Evans. Do you know what they do in the psych ward? Sarah, they strip you naked and lock you in a padded room. Is that what you want? Because I can make that happen within the hour. No. Please. Jason, you're hurting me." I cried out, terrified by the manic look in his eyes. "Then be ready tomorrow morning." He shoved me backward onto the bed and stormed out. As soon as I heard his car peel out of the driveway, I scrambled for the burner phone, my hands shaking so badly I dropped it twice. Frank, he's losing it." I sobbed into the receiver. He threatened me with the hospital again. I don't know if I can do this. "Sarah, listen to me." Frank's voice cut through my panic like a knife. "Breathe. Go to the window." I walked to the bedroom window and peered through the blinds. Down on the street, parked in the shadows of a large oak tree, was the black van. The headlights flashed once, brief and silent. "I am right here," Frank said, his tone softening. "I have a team on the perimeter. If he touches you again, we break down the door. But we are so close. We just need to push him one last time." Frank decided to force the issue. That night, the twins launched a cyber attack on Jason's company, Omega Solutions. It wasn't destructive, but it was terrifying. They triggered fake alerts from the bank and the IRS, freezing the company's operating accounts for a security audit. Jason panicked. Without access to his company funds, he was exposed. He needed the cash from my inheritance to cover the holes in his books before the audit became real. Early Friday morning, Jason burst into the room, his face pale. "Change of plans," he said, throwing a dress at me. "We aren't doing the signing here. We are going to Victoria's office. It's safer there." I relayed the information to Frank while I was in the bathroom. I expected him to be worried about the change in location, but instead, he laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. "Her office," Frank said. "That is perfect. That is where she keeps the physical ledgers. She just invited us into the vault." "I'm scared, Uncle Frank," I whispered, looking at my reflection. The woman staring back looked terrified, but beneath the fear, I saw the anger burning hot and bright. "Don't be," Frank replied. "Today is payday. Sarah, just remember the plan. Make them feel powerful. Make them feel safe. And then we take everything." The morning of the signing, I threw up twice before I could even brush my teeth. My stomach was a knot of cold, hard anxiety. But when I rinsed my mouth and looked in the bathroom mirror, the woman staring back at me was not the trembling victim Jason thought he knew. Her eyes were clear. Her jaw was set. I applied my makeup carefully to hide the determination, adding extra pale powder to simulate illness and fear. I managed to slip out the back door for 30 seconds while Jason was shouting at his tie in the mirror. Frank was waiting for me in the blind spot behind the garage, pressed against the brickwork like a shadow. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He pressed a heavy, expensive-looking ballpoint pen into my sweating palm. "This is not just a pen," Frank whispered urgently, his eyes darting to the kitchen window. "It has a high-definition camera in the clip and a microphone that can pick up a whisper from across the room. Do not put it in your purse. Keep it in your hand or on the table." I gripped the cold metal, nodding. "Listen to me, Sarah," he continued, gripping my shoulders. "You have to sell this. You have to be terrified. Cry, beg, stammer. Make them feel so powerful that they forget to look over their shoulders. Arrogance is their blindfold. Put it on them. I can do that," I stammered, practicing the tremor in my voice. "Good girl," Frank said. "I have already sent the package to the district attorney. He is an old friend." When he saw the flow of funds the twins uncovered, specifically the transfers from Omega Solutions to the accounts Victoria uses for her illegal gambling debts, he signed the warrant immediately. "It is a no-knock raid order." He checked his watch. "The twins are executing a loop on the Sterling Corp security grid right now. For the next 10 minutes, the cameras in the lobby and the elevators will show an empty hallway. That is our window to get the tactical team into position without Victoria's security seeing them." I slipped back inside just as Jason came thundering down the stairs. He was wearing his best suit, the one he bought for our anniversary 2 years ago, but his face was tight with a manic energy. "Let's go, Sarah," he barked, grabbing his keys. "We can't keep Victoria waiting. This is the biggest day of our lives." The drive to the city was suffocating. Jason insisted on holding my hand, playing the role of the supportive husband, but his grip was crushing. He squeezed my fingers until my wedding ring dug into my skin, a physical reminder of his control. "You're shaking," he noted, glancing at me with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't be nervous. Once you sign, all your worries go away. I'll take care of everything." I just feel so sick, Jason," I whined, leaning my head against the cold glass. "Are you sure this is the only way?" "It is the only way," he snapped, his patience fraying instantly. We pulled up to the towering glass monolith of the Sterling Corp building. As we stepped out onto the sidewalk, I scanned the street. At first, I saw nothing. Then, parked discreetly at the corner, nearly invisible in the morning traffic, was the black van. I saw a hand flash a thumbs up against the tinted window. I took a deep, shuddering breath, filling my lungs with the exhaust-tinged air. Victoria's executive suite was on the 42nd floor. The receptionist waved us through with a knowing look, clearly briefed to expect the stupid wife. When we entered the main office, the luxury was overwhelming. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city I was about to reclaim. Victoria was standing by her massive mahogany desk. She looked impeccable and terrifying in a sharp crimson suit, like a knife dipped in blood. On the desk sat a thick stack of legal documents and a silver bucket containing a bottle of chilled vintage champagne. "Right on time," Victoria purred, her eyes raking over my cheap coat with undisguised contempt. "Come in, Sarah. We have so much to discuss." I stepped onto the plush carpet, clutching the spy pen so hard my knuckles turned white. Jason walked in behind me. I heard the heavy oak door click shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. I was trapped. But as I looked from Jason's greedy smile to Victoria's predatory gaze, I realized the truth. I wasn't trapped in here with them. They were trapped in here with me. The silence inside the office was heavy, suffocating, and smelled of expensive leather and impending doom. Victoria did not invite us to sit. She leaned back against her desk, crossing her arms over her chest, and looked at me with an expression that sat somewhere between boredom and disgust. To her, I was not a person. I was a loose end that needed to be tied off so she could open that bottle of champagne. "Let's get this over with," Victoria said, her voice sharp. "I have a board meeting at 2. Jason guided me to the chair in front of the desk, his hands pressing down on my shoulders with false tenderness. He placed the stack of documents in front of me, flipping to the last page where a yellow sticky note marked the signature line. "Sweetheart," Jason said, his voice dropping to that manipulative, soft register he used whenever he wanted something. "Signing this is the best way to protect our future. I know it seems like a lot of legal jargon, but I will take all the heavy lifting off your shoulders. I will handle the investments, the taxes, everything. You won't have to worry about a single penny ever again." I picked up the pen Frank had given me. It felt heavy in my hand, a cold cylinder of justice. I let my hand tremble violently, the tip of the pen hovering inches above the paper. But Jason," I whimpered, looking up at him with wide, watery eyes. "The house. Grandma's house. If I sign this power of attorney, do I still get to live there? You won't. You won't make us move, will you?" I saw Jason's jaw tighten. He hated when I asked questions. He hated when I spoke at all. "Of course not. Baby." He lied through his teeth. "It's just a formality. Nothing changes for you. You just stay home and be you." I hesitated. I let the silence stretch, sniffing loudly and wiping my nose with the back of my hand, knowing how much the unrefined gesture would irritate Victoria. "I don't know." I sobbed softly. I feel so confused. Maybe I should call a lawyer just to explain it to me." That was the spark. Victoria pushed herself off the desk, her patience evaporating instantly. She slammed her hand down on the mahogany surface, the sound making me jump. "Sign the damn paper," she shouted, her face twisting into a mask of fury. "My God, Jason, how do you stand her? She is pathetic. You think you have a choice, you stupid woman. Your husband is sick of you. He has been sick of you for years." Jason dropped the act immediately. The loving husband vanished, replaced by the monster I had lived with in fear. He grabbed the back of my chair and spun it around so I was facing him. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck. "Sign it right now," he screamed, pointing a finger in my face. "I am done playing nice. Sarah, if that pen doesn't hit the paper in 5 seconds, I am calling Dr. Evans. Do you hear me? I will have the orderlies here within the hour to drag you out of here in a straitjacket. You will rot in the psych ward until you die." My heart was pounding, but I remembered Frank's instructions. "Get it on tape." I gasped, feigning a panic attack. I let my fingers go limp. The pen slipped from my hand and clattered onto the hardwood floor, rolling under the edge of the desk. "Oh, God, I'm sorry, I cried, sliding out of the chair and dropping to my knees to retrieve it. I grabbed the pen, but I didn't stand up immediately. I stayed crouched on the floor, angling the clip of the pen upward. The hidden lens was now pointed directly at their faces from a low angle, capturing their looming, menacing figures perfectly. "Look at her," Victoria sneered, looking down at me like I was a cockroach. "She is trembling like a dog." "Tell her, Jason. Tell her what the money is really for so she understands her place." Jason laughed, a cruel, ugly sound that echoed in the large room. He looked down at me, feeling completely safe in his victory. "You want to know why you are signing, Sarah?" He spat. "Because that money isn't for you. It's for us. It's to build an empire for me and Victoria. We are going to take your little inheritance, sell your grandmother's rotting house, and leave you with absolutely nothing. But you said," I whispered from the floor, making sure the microphone caught every syllable. "I lied." Jason grinned, showing his teeth. "And once I have power of attorney, I'm declaring you mentally incompetent. You will walk out of here with nothing but the clothes on your back. Now pick up the pen and sign, or I make the call." I stayed on the floor for 1 second longer, letting the weight of his confession hang in the air. He had said it. He had admitted to the fraud, the conspiracy, and the intent to harm, all while facing a federal-grade camera. I gripped the pen tightly. Then, I stopped shaking. I stood up slowly. I didn't scramble. I didn't stumble. I rose with a grace that belonged to a woman who had already won. I brushed the imaginary dust off my knees and looked at the paper on the desk. Then, I looked up. I met Jason's eyes. The tears were still wet on my cheeks, but the fear behind them was gone, extinguished like a candle in a hurricane. My voice, when I spoke, was steady, calm, and terrifyingly flat. "Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure you want me to sign this? Jason." The room went deadly quiet. The sudden shift in my demeanor hit them like a physical blow. Jason blinked, his mouth opening slightly, but no words came out. Victoria froze, her hand halfway to the champagne bottle. A flicker of doubt crossed her face, a primal instinct warning her that the prey had just stopped running. I placed the heavy silver pen gently onto the mahogany desk. I did not sign the paper. Instead, I smoothed the lapels of my cheap coat and looked directly into Jason's eyes. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "I don't think Mr. Roth, that imaginary investor from Switzerland, would like this very much," I said, my voice steady and devoid of the tremble I had perfected over the last 3 days. The color drained from Jason's face instantly. He looked as if I had just slapped him. What he whispered, his mouth hanging open. "What did you say?" "How do you know that name?" Victoria froze, her hand still hovering over the champagne bottle. She turned to me slowly, her eyes narrowing. "Who told you that name?" Victoria hissed. I stood up, pushing the chair back with my legs. I felt tall. I felt powerful. "And I also don't think the Internal Revenue Service will appreciate the way you are washing money through Omega Solutions." "Victoria," I continued, enjoying the way her jaw tightened. "The structuring of deposits under $10,000, that is a federal crime. 5 years per count." Victoria's face went from pale to a blotchy, violent red. She lunged across the desk, her manicured nails clawing at the air toward my face. "You bitch," she screamed. "Give me that phone, what do you know?" She didn't reach me. Before she could take 2 steps, her own phone on the desk began to ring. It was a shrill, demanding sound. She stopped, looking at the screen. It was her chief accountant. She snatched it up, putting it to her ear. What she barked into the receiver. I watched as her expression crumbled. She listened for 5 seconds, and in those 5 seconds, her arrogance died. "What do you mean locked out?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "What do you mean the files are copying themselves?" She dropped the phone. It clattered onto the desk. She looked at Jason, her eyes wide with true terror. "Someone is in the system," she whispered. "They are taking everything. The ledgers, the offshore accounts. Everything." Jason spun around to face me, panic making his movements jerky and uncoordinated. You did this," he stammered, shaking his head in disbelief. "No, you can't." "You are just a housewife. You are stupid. I made you stupid." I smiled, and it was the coldest smile I had ever worn. "I am the niece of Frank Miller," I said, stepping closer to him so he could see the fire in my eyes. "And you two just kicked a fire ant nest." Jason opened his mouth to scream at me again, but the heavy oak doors to the office burst open. It wasn't the police, not yet. It was Frank. He walked in wearing a dark suit that fit him perfectly. Flanking him were 2 men who looked like they were carved out of granite. Frank didn't look like a retired mailman. He looked like the man who used to make grown men cry in interrogation rooms. He walked right up to Jason. Jason shrank back, hitting the edge of the desk. "Hello, nephew-in-law," Frank said, his voice deep and smooth as velvet. "I heard you were planning to put my niece in a mental institution. That is interesting. I have a few friends in federal prison who would love to have a long, intimate chat with you about that." Victoria, realizing the walls were closing in, grabbed the stack of documents on the desk. She looked frantically for a shredder, her hands shaking so badly she dropped half the papers. "It's no use," Frank announced, lifting his hand. He was holding a small silver USB drive between his thumb and forefinger. "Don't bother tearing those up," Frank said, tossing the drive onto the desk where it landed with a mocking clatter next to the champagne. "We pulled a full digital clone of your hard drive while you were busy threatening Sarah. Copies of every bribe, every laundered dollar, and every fake invoice have been sitting on the district attorney's desk for 30 minutes. Victoria collapsed into her leather chair, burying her face in her hands. Jason looked from Frank to me, and for the first time, he saw us. He really saw us, and he knew it was over. The sound of sirens cut through the heavy silence of the office, rising from the streets below like a choir of judgment. Frank walked to the window and gave a single, sharp nod to someone on the ground. A second later, the heavy doors to the suite were kicked open, not by a secretary, but by a tactical team wearing vests emblazoned with FBI. Federal agents nobody move. The command was a roar that shook the glass walls. Victoria Vance, who had spent her life believing she was untouchable, tried to stand her ground. She smoothed her skirt, her face a mask of indignation. "Do you know who I am?" she screeched, pointing a trembling finger at the lead agent. "I will have your badges for this. I have lawyers who earn more in an hour than you earn in a year." The agent did not blink. He spun her around and slammed her against the mahogany desk she had used to terrorize her subordinates for a decade. "Victoria Vance, you are under arrest for racketeering, grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit fraud," the agent recited, the metal cuffs clicking shut around her wrists with a sound that was sweeter than music. "You have the right to remain silent." "Get off me!" she screamed, thrashing like a wild animal as they hauled her away. "Jason, tell them it was all your idea." Jason did not answer her. He had collapsed. My husband, the man who had strutted around our home like a king, was now on his knees on the plush carpet. He looked at the armed agents, then at Frank, and finally, his desperate eyes locked onto mine. He crawled toward me, tears streaming down his face, snot running from his nose. Sarah, please," he sobbed, reaching out to grab the hem of my coat. "I didn't want to do it. She made me. She threatened me. I love you, baby. You know I love you. Right. Tell them. Tell them I'm innocent." I looked down at him. For 3 years, I had feared this man. I had walked on eggshells to avoid his temper. I had starved myself to save money for his failed dreams. Now, seeing him groveling at my feet, stripping himself of every ounce of dignity to save his own skin, I felt nothing. The love was gone. The fear was gone. The only thing left was a profound, icy disgust. He reached for my hand, his fingers grasping at air. I took a deliberate step back, pulling my coat away from his touch as if he were diseased. Don't do this. "Sarah," he wailed, his voice cracking. "We can fix this. I can explain." I stared into his eyes, letting him see the reflection of his own ruin. "You were right, Jason," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the chaos of the room like a razor blade. "I will never forget what you did, and now, you will never forget today. No, Sarah." 2 officers hoisted him up by his armpits. His legs were dead weight. They dragged him toward the door, his expensive Italian shoes scuffing uselessly against the floor. "Sarah," he screamed my name one last time. a long, drawn-out howl that echoed down the hallway until the elevator doors slid shut, cutting him off forever. The office suddenly felt very big and very quiet. Frank walked over to me and placed a heavy, comforting hand on my shoulder. "It is over, Sarah," he said gently. "The house is safe. The DA has already frozen their assets. Every penny they stole from you, and likely a lot more in damages, will be returned. You are going to be a very wealthy woman." I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down. 42 floors below, lights flashed in the gray morning. I saw 2 figures being shoved into the back of 2 separate police cruisers. A crowd had gathered, and news cameras were already flashing. It was the end of their world. But as I watched the cars pull away into the traffic, I realized it was the beginning of mine. I took a deep breath. The air in the office was recycled and stale, but it tasted like oxygen. It tasted like freedom. The weight that had been crushing my chest for 3 years simply evaporated. I turned to Frank, and for the first time in a long time, the smile on my face reached my eyes. "We should go, Uncle Frank," I said. "We have a victory to celebrate, and I think I want to eat something very expensive." Frank grinned, the old warmth returning to his eyes. "I know a place. Best lobster in the city." We walked out of the office together, leaving the shattered remains of the conspiracy behind us. We stepped into the elevator, the doors closing on the past, ready to rise into a future that belonged only to me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment down below where you are listening from. I would love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and press that hype button so this story can reach even more people.